Welcome back, guys. Here with Ben for another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. Ben, good morning. Happy Friday. How are you doing this week, bud?
I'm doing awesome. It's Friday again. You know what that means? Pursuit of progress.
You know what? It's separation season. It's the day of the week where winners have separation. I know a lot of very high level coaches a lot of times talk about that on different industries, with Fridays being a day you kind of hit cruise control and take your foot off the gas. Or for a lot of people, it's when you really put your foot down, pedal to the metal, and use this as an opportunity to separate yourself from your competition. So hopefully you
That's
guys
right.
are taking some actions and some steps today to do the latter and be pursuing your own version of progress.
I love Fridays because I get up even earlier. I do more. They're typically, there's a lot to do, but I always feel very, very fulfilled. And getting to do this podcast is one of the reasons why.
And you guys, hopefully you're listening after having already listened or viewed our last episode, which was our first part of a two-part series. So this is our second part today, where we're basically just really utilizing Ben's expertise when it comes to credit cards and just credit in general, and just sharing with you guys the 6 factors that affect your credit score, along with some actionable steps for each of these 6 areas to improve your credit in 2024. We shared in last week's episode the first 3, which made up of the credit inquiries, which was about 5% of the overall score. Our second one was available credit, which was only about 3% of the overall score. And then a pretty big hitter, number 3, which was payment history, which was taking up 40% of the overall score. To save time today, if you guys haven't listened to the last episode, I recommend you go back and listen to that one. You don't necessarily have to listen to it before continuing on with this episode, but just make a point that if you haven't, make sure you also check out our episode 8 that last week premiered, going over these first 3 areas. But today, I'm going to be sharing the remaining 3 with Ben. So Ben, before we dive into that, I just wanted to just ask you what's going on with your shirt there. I know for any of our listeners or viewers that are not from Colorado, explain a little bit about what Casa Bonita is.
You know, Casa Bonita, it's the best restaurant in the world.
In the world?
Um, in the world, yeah. I had the opportunity to go there earlier this year with a buddy of mine who got some VIP tickets, and it's been closed since COVID. There was a massive renovation that was done of over $40 million. The owners of South Park bought it, renovated it, and it's great to see that it's in such great hands. I got this awesome T-shirt here. Also have my Casa Bonita cup that I'd love to sip tea out of or juice. And if you haven't already, make sure to get down there off of Colfax. I think it's in between Sheridan and Wadsworth off of Colfax.
Yeah, and I've been anxiously waiting to get my golden ticket to go check it out. I was pretty persistent on when they first started advertising that they're only doing advance reservations, and you have to get your reservation through these emails they send out when your kind of number gets called, so to speak. And I did it right away over a year ago, and I still haven't gotten an email from them. So hopefully sometime soon I'll get to check it out as well. I'm anxious to see what it's all about. We have some good friends from high school that worked there back in the day, 20 plus years ago, as
Yeah.
cliff divers and puppeteers, and some pretty fun high school jobs for a few of our
hmm
buddies. All right, so jumping into it, Ben, going to talk again about the remaining 3 areas that affect your credit score. So going right into number 4, this one's a pretty big one. This one is actually the most of these last 3 that we're sharing with you guys today. So this is one of the ones that has a pretty large impact overall on your score. It takes up about 21% of your overall score, and that's the age and diversity of accounts.
That's right. Yeah, really, really important factor here. And this is one that there probably isn't a lot of talk around. There's not a lot of knowledge around. Age and diversity of accounts, it matters. Essentially, what that means when it comes to age creditors are going to be looking at how old your accounts are, the credit bureaus. So, you want to make sure that you have some accounts that are going to be older. A personal rule that I have is that once an account hits 8 years, at that point, I will never close it. And the reason for that is it's because it's going to help just maturing my credit profile and really building out that age component. For example, the first credit card that I ever opened was, my freshman year when I was at the University of Kansas back in 2001. I still have that credit card open and active. And even though at the time I was only 21, or, actually I would have been less, I would have been, 18 or 19. This account has now been reporting on my credit for over 20 years. So it's very, very positive. I have other accounts, other credit cards that are now approaching like the 10 or 15-year mark. So you just want to be very aware of that and really try and have some accounts that are going to be older and help build out that credit profile. When it comes to the diversity of accounts, what that means is that the credit bureaus really want to understand that you have the ability to manage different types of credit in a responsible fashion. If you think about it, there's all different types of credit. We have mortgages that are amortized over 30 years. We have installment loans. An example of that would be an auto loan, which are typically, 3 to 7 years. The payments on those are a little bit higher comparative to the debt. Then you have revolving accounts, which are credit cards, lines of credit, where you can borrow from yourself via the revolving credit account. And creditors really want to see that you have the ability to manage your mortgage responsibly and make your payment on time and use that credit card in a responsible way. The interest rates, the payments, the account features of all these different accounts are very different. So you want to demonstrate that you have the knowledge and expertise to really manage all of these accounts in a very responsible way.
So I'd like your input as a father of two, teenage age children. Um, again, to really focus on building out this longevity of accounts. What age do you recommend that parents like yourselves start, recommending their kids get accounts? I first thing I think of is I would be a little bit weary of a child having a credit card that, potentially could be used irresponsibly and they just max it out without having the proper financial education and self-control. Um, so it's kind of a two-part question. What age do you think is appropriate, or what are you maybe going to do yourself with your kids? But then also, are there other options out there for somebody in this situation where, they are, allowing their kids to have a credit card to build it, but getting too far in the deep end with it? Are there other options out there that you might know of as far as ways that younger, less experienced, less financially educated teenagers could get this process started?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's a really, really important question because I don't think there is enough conversation around financial literacy, building credit, managing money, especially with our youth. Now, as passionate as I am about personal finance, is something that I'm always talking about. I think an important first step before the credit card is having your kids open a bank account, and getting that checking and savings account open, getting that debit card, learning how to log online and start to monitor some of their spending. Also, taking some satisfaction and some ownership with building out their savings. That's what we do in our household. Whenever my kids get any money at all, whether it's from a job or even if it's from a birthday gift or a Christmas gift, if someone gives them cash, they are required to put a certain percentage in savings always. If it's from a job, allowance, gift, whatever, they always have to put a percentage into savings. What we're doing is we're teaching them how to have strong and sound money management skills. If you're constantly and always saving, you'll never be broke. And then they're going to be learning how to invest. So I think that's an important step. I opened the checking and savings accounts for my kids when they were in the seventh grade. and they both have a debit card. And I'll tell you this too: like they love going to Starbucks after school with their friends and pulling out their debit card, and all of their other friends, and it says their name on it, and all
Hmm.
of their other friends are using mom's cash or dad's cash or might have a gift card. And my daughter is like, well, I'm going to pull up my debit card that has my name on it, and this one's on me, guys. So that they
That's
do
cool.
like that, but it also gives them much more ownership as well than a parent just giving your kid $20. And so that's a great starting point. And then when they're ready, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my kids as an authorized user to my credit card when they're 16 years old. And there's several different reasons for that. Number one, they will be able to piggyback on my credit. And so the account that I'm going to add them to as an authorized user, well, that account's been open for 15 years. And so now all of a sudden, even though they're only going to be 16, they will now get credit for having an account that has been open and active for 15 years, has never had a late payment, and is being used in a responsible way. That will automatically bring their score up and over 800 by that one thing alone. Number two, they get all of the protections that I get. So all of the protections that I get from zero liability, purchase protection, they are then covered under all of that. So from a protection perspective, it's very, very important. And then kind of to your last point, I have the ability to set their settings to where even though, let's say for example, this specific card might have a limit of 50 grand, I can set their limit at 500 or 1,000, and I
Exactly.
can send their one-time purchase limit at $100. So you have the ability to control a lot. And what we're doing is trying to teach them those strong financial habits and manage it in a responsible way.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say there's definitely some little levers you can pull within your account settings to limit authorized users, dollar amounts that they can spend per transaction, per day, their limit, all that good stuff. So don't think, you guys that are listening or watching today, don't think that that's um, you know a super large concern about worrying your kids are going to take your card and go to the mall and rack up a huge bill on you. There's ways to prevent that.
Yeah, and it's so important because, this is just a topic that I just constantly hit home with. There is no financial literacy in our school system. A lot of adults are not financially literate. They do not know how this stuff works. It's so funny because I'm always saying that this stuff should be taught in school, and one of the things that people push back on is that, well, no, this should be taught at home. Well, it should be taught at home, but the reality is most parents just don't have these skills to teach this stuff in an adequate way. So, like, parents need to educate themselves. They need to really understand how this stuff works and then start teaching this to their kids. And we need to be talking about money. We need to be talking about credit, because this is something that if the individual or the child gets wrong, I mean, it's going to have a huge negative impact on their life. If they're going to turn into a consumer or a spender or someone that's just constantly spending all their money, it's not a fun way to live. And when you are in control of your credit, of your finances, you understand how to build wealth, it can truly be life changing.
One last story on my end on this topic. I think we're probably the last generation, meaning us that are in our, late 30s to 40s and above, where using cash is even a memory or something that we've done and maybe continue to do it to some extent. But I think about just how often I even carry cash on me, how rare it is for me to pay cash for something nowadays. That
Hmm.
is just completely going away. And I'm sure within our lifetime, I don't know if dollars will be completely, taken out of circulation. I'm sure they'll exist to some extent in some fashion, but I'm sure more and more businesses won't accept them anymore just from a risk of getting robbed and just, I don't know, other issues that they're maybe wanting to avoid down the road, just because the percentage of people that are paying, with a card, some form other than physical money in your
Hmm.
hands is just only going to continue to go more and more away from the physical cash. But the reason I'm bringing this up, when I was younger and just learning about money, back in my, high school days, you know, working a job where I get, maybe like again, I said babysitting or mowing the lawn, something where a neighbor is just giving you cash This
Yeah.
is before Venmo days, you guys. We had this physical object, this physical connection with the dollars in our hands, in our wallet. And there is something to be said about when you're paying with cash, it stings more to pay. You have this really true association with, I am giving my money to this to buy this. And
Hmm.
with the credit card, it has just completely brought down that level of connection with what $20 is. If you have a physical
Yeah.
$20 or $100 bill in your hand versus just paying on your credit card $100 for something, I guarantee 9 times out of 10, if it's something that isn't necessarily a product or something that you really truly need, if it's more of an impulse buy, if you're paying with cash, there's a lot higher chance you're not going to buy it with versus
Hmm.
with a credit card. And I just think with the young generation now, not having that as a teaching tool in their younger ages of just the concept of money, I think that's hurting society because of that.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, that's the number one problem right now with American consumerism is that people, when it comes to credit cards, they have that approach. I'm just like, this is an access pass for me to go spend up to the limit. The limit might be 10,000. Well, that means I can go spend 10,000. And then once it hits 10,000, I can't spend anymore. But that is a total wrong approach. You're absolutely right. But I'm also, I'm the same way. I'm one to never carry cash on me ever. Like, I'm the worst at that. And it's funny because, there's this one utility bill. I think it's my sewer bill that I have to pay annually. And the only form of payment that they accept is you have to mail a check. You have to like get out a check, write a check, and then mail it in. And I'm like, dude, get it together here. Who like mail a check? I never mail anything and I never use checks. It's this huge inconvenience. And I'm always, like a month or two late because I have to go down to my bank, get a check and then go get a stamp and then put it in an envelope. And it's so, I mean, to your point there, it's so crazy to think how much that has changed with, credit cards. Credit cards really didn't emerge until like the 1970s. And now we are a debt driven society. Consumer spending in the United States makes up 70% of our economy. That's over $13 trillion. And that's why our American economy has grown so much over the past like several decades is because of debt. People have the ability through debt just to spend so much more than they did otherwise, like in the 50s, 60s, and before. And now we just, now we have so many more tools. We have, Venmo, we have Zelle, we have Cash App, credit cards, there's cryptocurrency. So it is interesting to see how the currency game is changing.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would imagine credit cards are making up maybe 90% plus of purchases. I imagine cash probably is a good chunk of that remaining 10%, and then checks are even less. I'm sure that's the lowest of the three. But I also remember, my parents were very good with managing their money as a child, thinking back to just how diligent they were with balancing their checkbook and
Hmm.
just how physically writing in the back of their checkbook, just to keeping their balance and making sure that debits equal to credits and that balances out correctly. And I think about my grandma and grandpa at the time too, just how one little you know check entry didn't get made, and then my dad would have to go over and help them balance it. It became this big ordeal where eventually my dad just kind of took over from doing it for them. But
Mm.
just again, to something that's so archaic, the amount of people today that probably truly do the balancing the checkbook method like that is slim to none, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the time and I mean how just the steps involved with balancing a checkbook. I think you're right. I don't think there's hardly anyone, probably like older generations, baby boomers probably still do that, but I don't balance it. I mean, I don't even use checks. This is not even a payment. I do not like using checks for several. I mean, number one is security.
Hmm.
It's just a huge security risk. When you use a check, your name's on there, your mailing address, which is typically your residence address, your bank account is on there,
Yeah, your
and
account
your
number.
routing number. It's a huge freaking security risk.
Yeah, I think definitely it's going to not be around too much longer, people doing it that way. And also just keeping receipts, even with your credit cards, just the manually tracking and balancing and just making sure you've got everything saved and recorded. So anyways, guys,
Unless you're Coach Prime, right?
true. He writes checks that is ass can't cash or whatever he says.
Keeping receipts. Well, hey, one thing I learned on receipts, and this, I just read this, probably here in the last like 2 or 3 weeks. Did you know that the paper that the receipt is printed on, they're finding out that that paper is extremely toxic. And so that paper, like when you get a receipt, someone gives you a receipt, that little paper that the receipt is printed on, extremely toxic, has all sorts of chemicals. Like you should not be touching it. I don't accept receipts anymore. If I have to take one, like I'll just like barely grab it, go put it in the trash and then immediately wash my hands.
Wow. Okay. If everybody didn't know that Ben was a little bit of a hippie, okay, a little extra cautious there, but okay.
No, seriously, it's like a huge, and like that's going to be changing. Like it's very, very toxic.
Okay, good to know. All right, guys, let's move on. So again, number 4 that we just shared with you was the age and diversity of accounts. So going into number 5 of 6, so it's the 5th of our 6 parts of the credit score. It's the utilization of revolving accounts, also known as your credit utilization ratio. And this is very similar to the last one. This was at 20% of the overall score. So Ben, share a little bit more with us. I know there's several things we can chat about on this. And I actually learned, this is an example of something that I learned recently that I did not know about before. My mindset of less is more, meaning that going out and getting 4 or 5 different credit cards and just having, in my opinion, I thought that was too much leverage or too much exposure to debt or to credit that would negatively affect my credit score, when in fact, increasing that total amount of available credit, and I'll let you talk more specifically about this, Ben, but that's that credit utilization ratio. It helps improve your ratio because you have a larger total amount to make that number, that percentage.
Yeah, this is the big one. Even though there's two other types, two other distinctions of what makes up your score that are more impactful than this. This is the one that people really, really, really struggle with, and it's known as the credit utilization rate, or the utilization of revolving accounts. And so, how this is defined is creditors, the credit bureaus are going to be looking at the balance of the revolving account. So keep in mind, revolving accounts are credit cards, in-store charge cards, and then also accounts like home equity lines of credit. Those are the 3 most common types of revolving accounts: credit cards, in-store charge cards, and home equity lines of credit. So how this ratio is calculated, the credit bureaus are going to look at what percentage of the available credit is being used. So if you have a credit card and the limit is $10,000 and you have a balance on that credit card of 3,000, where essentially your credit utilization rate under that scenario would be 30%. $3,000 balance, $10,000 limit, credit utilization rate of 30%, meaning that you're using 30% of your overall available credit. Now, what's interesting, and this is what people don't understand, to qualify for the highest grade in this specific reporting type, you have to keep your credit utilization under 10%. And so if you have a $10,000 limit, if you want to qualify for the highest grade in this component, your balance should never go over $1,000. If it goes over $1,000 on a $10,000 limit, your score is going to start to adversely be impacted.
Let me stop really quick on that. So that's still, though, only being reported to the credit bureau. And I thought it was just once a month. I think you were saying it's twice a month. So it's not, I mean, they have a little bit of room to get it back down below 10%. But so just to clarify, guys, it's not like if you ever go above that 10%, there's some time windows here.
Yeah, and you can make a purchase, and typically what I do though is I will pay down my credit cards several times a month, even though my payment is only due once a month. I actually make credit card payments probably on a weekly basis. I'll pay off my credit card 4 or 5 times a week. I've worked with customers in the past who, I was talking to this gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he has 4 or 5 credit cards, and he would just, he would pay them off in full every month, but he would like literally max them out and then pay them off because he was using them for business. And even though he wasn't getting charged any interest, the way that he was using the credit cards is really not how they're intended to be used. And so it dropped his score like 200 points.
Wow.
Staying under 10% may not be doable for everyone. At a minimum, you always want to stay under 30%. The mistake that most Americans make is that they max out their credit cards, or their utilization rate is 50, 60, 70%, if not maxed out. And when you max out your credit cards, your score is going to drop. And then this is the other factor that's really, really important. It's not, the credit bureaus are going to be looking at the individual credit utilization rate, but then they're also going to be looking at the global credit utilization rate as well. So what the global credit utilization rate is what is the balances of all of your credit cards and your home equity line of credit compared to what the available limit is. So it matters on an individual account basis, but that it then matters on the accumulative total from all of your revolving accounts combined. So both matter. And I think you made this point a couple of weeks ago where, if you are, and that's why in some cases you want to have a couple of different credit cards. Because if you have if you have 4 credit cards and the limit is $10,000, well, spread your spending out over the 4 credit cards. That way you can keep each individual account under 10%, and also keep your global account under 10% as well.
I wonder if there's any tools out there. It sure seems like it would be a good business idea to have some sort of tool incorporated into some of these banking online, platforms. You go to your Capital One, for example, credit card account online, and let's just say instead of the minimum payment, or somehow basically giving you what that dollar amount is to pay to keep it under that 30% or under that 10%. Because I'm sure if you have a
Mhm.
credit limit of 12,500, all of a sudden that gets a little bit gray area of, oh, what's 30% of that? It'd be cool if they just had some tool available where you could always just kind of ensure that you're in that correct zone. Maybe there is.
Yeah, I do my banking with Chase, and a lot of the bigger banks will have complimentary like Chase is called the Credit Journey app. And so what that does, it's built into their online Chase app, and you can kind of scroll down, and essentially it's a free complimentary credit monitoring service. So not only does it reference all of your accounts and the balances, but then there is a little section that lets me know what my utilization rate is. Um, at any given time of the month. So that's something that I really check on like at least 2 or 3 times a week. I'm very intentional with my banking apps. I log on daily. I review that multiple times a week, and that's kind of the attitude that you want to have when it comes to some of this stuff. It doesn't take a long time, but I do go down and see what is being reported. What is my current utilization rate? Which account do I need to go pay off? So there are some resources out there. And remember, when it comes to the utilization rate, it's about percentages, not dollars. And so that's another reason why, and we chatted on about this last week. You always want to have, your credit limits be as high as you can. 10% of a $50,000 limit is 5,000. If your credit limit is only 10,000, well, your credit, that means that you have to keep your balance under 1,000. And a lot of times for someone that's just starting out and building their credit, they might only have a credit limit of $1,000 or $2,000. And so that's where, especially when those credit limits are a lot lower, you have to be, you want to, like, if you have a charge, you want to go pay that off immediately. Because it really, if your limit's only $1,000 and you go fill up your gas tank for $120, well, now all of a sudden by that one charge, you're over 10%.
And just from listening to you talk just now, I learned something new. I didn't realize that global utilization ratio was also a factor. I was just recently, I opened up a couple new cards after learning some of this over the last couple months to improve that total dollar amount to make it so my, global ratio had a larger number to pull from. So it was less and less and less. But what I've been doing is I still have my kind of main card that I use for all my business expense. I just kind of put almost everything on my one card. So I might
Hmm.
have two or three. I think I have two others, but I really haven't been using them ever or at all. So they're really not doing probably as much for me, because I'm still, maybe approaching that 30% on the one card and not even utilizing these others. So it does probably make sense to diversify the cards you're using and spend, a little bit more evenly on all of the cards.
Hmm. That's a great point, and that's exactly what you should do.
Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, guys. So, sixth, last but not least, is account balances. So, this one makes up 11% of the overall score. And this one I, wasn't quite as familiar with. So, Ben, share a little bit about what account balances is referring to.
Yeah, what and it is interesting because there is sometimes confusion on this. And really what account balances is about is making sure that you have your debt categorized in the right places and that you're using, your credit cards in the right way. And long-term debt is earmarked to long-term debt instruments, and short-term debt is being used with short-term debt instruments. The example that I'll use is, take for example a mortgage. Someone that has $1 million mortgage is not going to be penalized compared to compared to a homeowner that has a $250,000 mortgage. Even though the person that has $1 million mortgage literally has four times the amount of debt, it's not about the dollars and the debt outstanding. It's about, is the debt categorized correctly. So in that example, both individuals have that debt categorized as long-term 30-year fixed interest rate debt. So it's about the vehicle. They have the long term debt in a long term debt instrument, which is the mortgage. You want to make sure that you have your short term debt categorized correctly in short term instruments like credit cards. This is also why, and I made this point last week, how you use credit cards, it can actually impact three or four different categories. So if you're not managing your credit cards correctly, it's going to impact your utilization rate. It's going to impact your available credit. It's going to adversely impact your account balances. If you're someone that's not paying your credit card off every month, well, what you're doing is you're not really treating like that. You're not really treating your debt as as short-term debt. You're carrying a balance on your credit card and it's rolling over every month and you're paying interest. Well, that's not really how credit cards are supposed to be used because they're revolving accounts. So when you manage your card like that, that's going to, adversely impact your account balances as well.
Justifying the $5,000 vacation in the springtime and thinking to yourself you're going to pay it off before the end of the year, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
So with account balances, the last thing I'll just say on this one is just also being very, very cautious about any sort of, I don't know if you guys have heard of the term hard money before, but there are also more, this is more from a business perspective here for any entrepreneurs listening, but when you're trying to bootstrap, get your business going off the ground, a lot of times one of the things that's always an issue is having enough money to get your business up and running. And a lot of these hard money lenders prey on people like this, which are just, basically a shorter term loan for a lot of times a higher dollar amount. It could be 50 or 100,000 or even more, but with
Hmm.
a short repayment plan. In fact, I had one when I was expanding my previous business. We basically ran out of money during our build out and just needed to figure it out. Got I think it was a $75,000 hard money loan through, I think the company was called Lendio. They still call me to this day to try and, get me to get something else with them, which I would not recommend unless it really truly financially makes sense. But I think it was a $75,000 loan and it had to be paid back. I think it was I don't think it was 24 months. I think it was 36 months. So you
Yeah.
just think about just the dollar amount that has to be made every month, just to keep your payments on time. And I just bring that up because that is an area that my personal credit score, I'm positive, was greatly negatively affected because of this. Because you think of a big expense as a business owner. You're just getting off the ground. You've got to finish the build out. You've got to buy equipment. That's not a immediate ROI where from that day forward you're going to start collecting money to help pay that down. So what happens is you just from day one are up against the wall and just have no ability to really be in a position to pay that off successfully or have a high rate of success to paying those off. So just be very, very cautious about how stuff like that can negatively affect your score, and just be aware of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It illustrates that you really want to know what you're signing up for. What are the features and the characteristics of the debt that you're considering?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, especially with hard money or credit cards, one missed payment can accelerate interest rates. It can have you know accelerate when it's due. It can take it down from 36 months to immediately. And so it's just something that we want to be aware of. And then you want to make sure that your financial plan as a consumer, as an investor, as a saver aligns with the correct tools. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct tools for what you're looking to accomplish.
Love it. All right, guys. Well, that was the sixth and final one. So just to kind of share a few takeaways as we wrap this episode up. So I'm just going to share with you guys just one quick recap of all six that we shared with you guys over the last episode and this current episode. So to make up that 100% of the score, we've got number one, credit inquiries, making up 5%. We've got number two, available credit, that making up only 3%. That's the smallest of all six of these. Number three, the largest of all, payment history, making up 40% of the overall score. Number four, age and diversity of accounts, making up 21% of the overall score. Number five, utilization of revolving accounts, also known as the credit utilization ratio. That's 20% of the overall score. And then last but not least, the account balances, making up the remaining 11% of the overall score. You guys, if you have any feedback on any of this, we'd love to hear from you. And you guys can leave your comments down below and just share with us some of your personal experiences or just feedback on some of these topics we've shared with you today. A couple takeaways that I've had from the last two episodes that I'll share really quick, and then let Ben share what he has. One thing that I mentioned earlier in the last episode was if you guys are currently renters and you're aspiring homeowners, you're a first-time home buyer, you're aspiring to be a first-time home buyer, this is something that's very important to you, is really improving this credit score and getting you in a position where you're going to be getting the best rate and have the highest chance for success for getting pre-approved for this loan you're going to be using to buy a house. And that's to, as a renter, look into some programs that are out there. Some are free, provided by your current landlord, or you can just pay a monthly fee. It's only like usually $5 or $10 a month. One of my buddies has a company like this called Tackle, Tackle, Tackle. But basically what it's doing is it's taking a monthly large payment that you have, such as your rent, which typically is not reported and not affecting improving your credit score. You have the ability to sign up for some programs that will do it on a regular, consistent basis, basically a manual share with your credit reporting bureaus to give you credit for being consistent with your rent payments. You can also do this with some of your utility payments. So that was one of the two takeaways that I had from the last two episodes. And then the second one that I have is just going back to how important it is to look at credit as an opportunity, if done correctly, and taking on additional credit cards if and only if you have the financial responsibility of not just using that credit to make emotional purchases or just unnecessary purchases. So just being understanding, though, that adding credit limits, increasing your credit limits is actually a positive, not a negative, which is something that for 35 years of my life, I didn't really have a clear understanding of that, and was pretty frequently against getting additional credit cards because I thought that was actually a negative, not a positive.
Yeah, and I don't know that we ever actually touched on this, but the whole reason that you want to have, a great score, and the reason that you want to manage your credit responsibly is because, your score is going to be benefited. You're going to have a higher score. And when you have a higher score, it's going to give you access to more opportunities, to more options. It's going to give you access to better financing terms. You are literally going to pay less from a cost perspective, from an interest rate perspective, than someone who does not. If you're talking about things like auto loans or mortgages, I mean, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars over 30 years. So it is extremely important. And those that win the money game also win the credit game. So if you want to win the money game, you have to win the credit game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I love that. I think we had a ton of value in the last 2 episodes, and you guys, hopefully we were able to kind of present this in a way that's maybe not quite as boring and mundane and just kind of confusing as I know it's been for myself over the years, and I know I'm not alone on that. So, just hopefully you guys can take a few things from these 2 episodes and work on improving those areas consistently. It's not about just shiny object syndrome and going from one of these 6 things to the other. It's just really digging into what's most important, what is the most controllable for your unique scenario, and then just be consistent about that. Take action on it today, but be very consistent. And over a long period of time, that's when you're going to see the greatest improvements in growth. You can't just, do this for a month and then kind of forget about it. You really just have to have that consistency.
Yeah, it's behavior. It's a lifestyle. It's how you have to live. And as we're wrapping up here, it's about living from a place of demand or living from a place of abundance. When you are always behind, or you're always trying to get your credit card balance paid off, or you're fighting all these bills, you're living from a place of demand. And normally, the reason for that is because that individual is just overspending.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to that financial behavior that you were talking about last week. The inability of that specific individual to control their spending, thinking that because they have this credit card limit of 10,000, they can go and spend that much. So when you change your behavior, you're going to change your world and you're going to change your life.
Love it, man. Very inspiring. You guys, if you have a desire to have this be a priority and a focus for you in 2024, we also have some great resources for you. Ben has a very awesome YouTube channel, American Money 101. He releases videos every single week. There's been some really, really good episodes recently, digging a lot deeper into some of the stuff we've talked about today. Some very, very easy to understand, actionable ideas and suggestions that he's used to grow his wealth over the years, and also just ideas for you guys to hopefully apply to yourselves in your own situations. And then I also have a brand new 11-week playbook for improving your credit score in 2024. So if you guys are interested in signing up for that, it's totally free. It's just weekly emails where I'm sharing ideas, tips, videos, all kinds of valuable info for you. Just go ahead and click the link that I'll include in the show notes below, and you guys can sign up for that. But Ben, any closing words before we wrap up?
I just want to encourage everyone. I know a lot of times this information can be overwhelming. It can be a little intimidating, but understand the fundamentals, educate yourself on the basics, and just start to build that momentum. You can do it. You got this. You can do it.
Love it, man. Well, you guys, hope you have a great rest of your week. We're really enjoying putting these out for you on a weekly basis. Please, if you could, leave a comment on the Spotify or on the Apple Podcasts platform. Leave us a 5-star review if you could. That's the only way we can get this off the ground and start reaching a larger, more expansive audience. And if you guys have any specific topics, would maybe even be interested in being a guest on our podcast in the future, we'd love to hear from you. So reach out and touch base with us. We'd love to connect. And until next week, Ben, the Pursuit of Progress podcast, I'm signing out.
See you guys next week.
See you guys.